Hi, good afternoon. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN. We're a nonprofit that presents programming exploring human development across the lifespan. I am so excited to welcome you to today's conversation between Professor Colin M. Fisher and Professor Amy C. Edmondson. Thanks for joining us. FAN's YouTube channel has an archive of nearly 400 videos of past events, so be sure to subscribe to the channel to get updates when new recordings are posted. And now for some introductions. Originally inspired by the profound influence others had on his experience as a professional jazz trumpet player, Colin Fisher has been studying group dynamics, creativity, and improvisation for almost 20 years. As an associate professor of organizations and innovation at University College London's School of Management, he teaches students how to lead and work creatively in groups and organizations. Colin's academic research has uncovered the hidden processes of helping groups and teams in situations requiring creativity, improvisation, and complex decision-making. His work has been profiled in prominent media outlets such as BBC, Forbes, Harvard Business Review, NPR, and The Times. Joining him as one of our favorite humans, Amy Edmondson is the Novartis Professor of Leadership and Management at the Harvard Business School. Professor Edmondson studies teaming, psychological safety, and organizational learning, and her articles have been published in numerous academic and management outlets. Her 2019 book, The Fearless Organization, has been translated into 15 languages, and her latest book, Right Kind of Wrong, builds on her prior work on psychological safety and teaming to provide a framework for thinking about, discussing, and practicing the science of failing well. And now let's offer a warm fan welcome to Colin Fisher and Amy Edmondson.
Hi, Colin. Yeah, it's just us now, right?
I know.
We're all alone here.
Yeah.
Let's dig in. I'm so excited to
Yeah.
talk to you. And for everybody out there, Colin and I have known each other for those whole 20 years, I'm pretty sure. When you joined the PhD program, I was already an assistant professor, but very much we were part of the same network of people interested in groups and teams. So it's so great to see you here, and so great to celebrate this wonderful book. And I actually, I've read it, I loved it, and still I'm going to ask questions that I think will try to bring out some of the key ideas in a way that'll be fun here and relevant for the fan group. So should I just dig in?
Yeah, why don't we just dig in? Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Yeah. So sure. So let's start with, it's the collective edge. That refers to the fact that, simply put, a team is better than individuals acting alone. So tell us about the myth of the lone genius and where it comes from, why it's so pervasive, and then we'll look at why it's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I was really struck when I kind of took on writing this book by how individualistic our explanations for almost everything in the world is. So whether it's great scientific discoveries, whether it's entrepreneurs and business geniuses, whether it's artists or even stars on sports teams where they're obviously part of a team, but we're still raising up this one person. Yeah. And that when I looked into the research on this, individualism is actually really on the rise in the world, and it's not just in the kind of traditional countries we would think it is. It's not just the US and Western Europe where we think of these as like individualistic places. It's everywhere. So it's, I feel like the myth of the lone genius, which is basically this idea that we should give credit to these single great people for what are quite obviously collective accomplishments, whether they're inventions or businesses or whatever they may be.
Absolutely. No, and it is. I love that you say it's a myth and it goes deep. And I hadn't really thought about it, but I can see you're right that it's on the rise rather than heading in the other direction in our more complex, interdependent world than ever. It's sort of heading in the wrong direction, if you will. And by wrong, it's not morally wrong. It's just scientifically wrong, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's this kind of weird paradox where we're in a time where we need collaboration more than ever, where the problems that we have in the world are complicated. They require crossing boundaries within organizations, between nations, between all kinds of groups of people. And yet we're living in the most individualistic time in human history. That we, use more individualistic language. They've been tracking this over the past, 100 and some odd years. And so it's like we say I and me at higher rates in our writing and the stuff that we can find on the internet than ever. We even give our kids more unique names than anyone ever has before. And that we we live in smaller households than ever before. So every measure that sort of scientists have looked at to say how individualistic is the world, this is right now the kind of age of individualism, yet the problems we have require collaboration more than ever.
And so just to drive it home, the cost, right? The cost of this cultural obsession is
it's kind of like you said, it's being wrong. And that what being wrong gets us is when we have this kind of myth of the lone genius, we think the solution is to find that next genius, and that's what's going to solve our problems. That we think, oh, if we can just hire the right person, if we can follow the right leader, if we find that individual, then that's what's going to save us. But then at the same time, if we're not paying attention to our groups and we're not taking care of them, we're not building them effectively, then we're not going to solve these problems. That we're going to kind of languish in with the world we've got. Not that that's all terrible, but that there's a lot of problems where we need a lot of collaboration. That if we're waiting for that genius to come and solve these problems, we're not going to be very happy with the solution.
And the genius is particularly unable to solve these wicked problems, right? These complex problems that are multifaceted and affect many things, right? That really call for collaboration. So then that says, okay, so we got to have a group. We got to have collaboration. Now, most people assume that groups or teams are slow, messy, less effective than that, that individual who knows what they're doing and off they go. But what does the science say?
Yeah, I mean, groups can be messy, of course. That we've all experienced that. We've all been in meetings that feel pointless and groups that are ineffective. And so I think those kind of negative experiences stay with us. That we know, human beings, our psychology is wired such that these negative experiences are more vivid in our memories, that we remember them more strongly, they have a bigger impact on us. But that when we really look at who's coming up with the next breakthroughs, who's making the big scientific discoveries, who is really making the world changing businesses, it's not individuals. And that right now in science and technology, there's a great paper that shows that teams are now 6 times more likely to make a breakthrough discovery than an individual working alone. And that this trend's just been increasing over time.
Wow.
And this
across
is that kind of paradox.
Across
content? So this was a study of patents and research discoveries in science, engineering, and technology. But they looked at, this was true. So the number 6.3 is from that particular field, but the same trend was true across all other fields except for the arts and humanities, where the groups didn't have all that much of an advantage over individuals.
Makes sense, right? When you think about the nature of the problems they're trying to solve, the degree of deep expertise and interdependence, it's really remarkable. So given this potential, I mean, I think there's really, we all, as you say, we've all had experiences of teams and teamwork and groups that were frustrating and ineffective, even when you had the right, potentially the right people or the right skill sets on the team. So why is it so hard to get that synergy, that combination that we dream of and that can happen in these, patents and so forth? And how do you how do you increase the chances of that happening?
I mean, the first thing, and something I've found as I've been talking to people more about this, is it's hard to even get people to think about groups. So as our shared mentor, Richard Hackman, used to say, to think at the group level.
Right.
And one thing I learned from researching this is people remember what you say better if you rhyme. So I'm changing think at the group level to take a collective perspective, right? And then if we can, and that we really struggle to do that we experience the world as individuals, that that we perceive individuals as being the kind of change agents in the world so much that social psychologists call it the fundamental attribution error, because it's right there at the bottom of how we think about why people do what they do, that it's because of the kind of person they are, it's because of their traits, it's because of things inside of them. But that getting the most out of groups means first we have to acknowledge that they're actually a meaningful unit to pay attention to. And then we have to acknowledge that what really makes them work well or poorly is often in their bones. It's in the stuff that's inside of them that we don't really see on the outside part. And that unless we're looking at what we would call group structure, these bones of the group, we're often going to miss what it is that's making them ineffective or effective.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying understand the context, understand the structures or the setup, who's there, what processes are they using, things like that.
Well, more so, I think structure, what I mean by structure is fairly concrete, where it's goals that the group has, the tasks it's doing, the composition of the group, so who's on the group, and we'll probably talk about later, importantly, how many people are in the group, and the norms of the group, and that that part's a little more invisible than the other parts, but that collectively those four things make up the group structure, and those are things that we have to pay attention to often before the group exists, that we have to be thinking about how we're going to put this group together, and not then having a group and saying, oh, how can I make it better? Well, a lot of that stuff were decisions that were made before you got in the room with everyone else.
You may have to redesign the group. So I think of that list as a list of things that really are arguably levers, right? They're things that you can do something about. So as opposed to the things that are emergent, emergent phenomena in the group. But the levers will increase the chances that you get that synergy that you're talking about. Just for fun, and I almost hate this question, but how is remote work shaping or reshaping or challenging any of these classic sort of factors, phenomena?
So I think about remote work. I'm curious to hear what you think too, but that I think of it as it makes everything harder, but that if you have a problem in your group, the chances that that problem is unique to remote work are low, and the chances that it's one of these structural issues are higher. But that, I think what remote work does is it especially makes it harder for us to humanize one another, and it makes some kinds of communication, especially our reading of nonverbal cues, harder. And I like to talk about the concept of psychological distance when we think about remote work, and that what psychological distance does is it's just what it sounds like. It makes us feel like the other person is farther away from our experience, our thoughts, our feelings. But that what that does is it makes us view other humans more abstractly, and that when we view humans like abstractions, we tend to treat them more like objects and less like other human beings. And so I think the important thing in remote work is when you realize that's happening, you have to do something more than you would ordinarily do. To remind us, hey, these are other humans. We need to foster more psychological closeness. when we're in these settings, and that can take a lot of different forms. But it's, even things like, having our real backgrounds behind us, can have small effects. Sharing things about our lives can have effects on this. But I think, when people sort of turn to those things first, then they're often kind of missing the point about what may be going on in their teams. But one other thing on this one, where I think we sometimes conflate the word hybrid with two different things. So when we say hybrid, there's hybrid work arrangements, meaning sometimes I work from home, sometimes I go into the office as an individual. That's generally good, right? That kind of provides flexibilities for individuals. It allows us to get broader array of voices in the room often. But then there's hybrid meetings, where some people are physically in the room and some people online. And my read of the research on hybrid meetings is they're worse than either of the other two alternatives. That when we're all online and we're all in the same space, in the same situation, we can develop these norms for how we're going to interact, how we're going to communicate, how we're going to overcome the barriers that we have when we're online. And that when we're all in the room, we can do that too. But when some people are online, some people are in the room, it's harder for groups to develop norms. Usually there's a subgroup of people that gets disadvantaged in this, typically the people who are online. And that especially if we're switching who's in the room and who's online, and it's not consistent from meeting to meeting, then it just makes it harder and harder for the group to figure out how we're going to solve the everyday problems of meetings that we have. So hybrid work, good. Hybrid meetings, bad. And that's good.
I would go so far as to say hybrid work good if you've put some real design thought into it, right? If hybrid work means some days I'm at home, sometimes I'm in, you never really know when. And by the way, when I come in, I look around, no one else is there. It's kind of pointless, right? So that's not, I think it's some of the same advice you were describing for remote work, which is, if that's a choice that makes sense for your team or your firm, okay, but structure is your friend. You're going to need to be even more heavy-handed about it.
I mean, I think this is, in a way, this is the kind of deeper truth about any collaboration, is that when we make assumptions about what other people are thinking, what other people know, then that's when things go wrong. And that making kind of our tacit assumptions about why things are good, what they're going to achieve, making those things explicit is what helps us coordinate. But that also some predictability is necessary for coordination. If I literally have no idea what you're going to do, I don't know when you're going to be in the office, when you're not going to be in the office, if I don't know how to get a hold of you, that's going to make it harder for us to collaborate. Right. I mean, that's kind of common sense, but
it's how I mean, I've always thought about, the difference between over the wall collaboration, in the coordination sense. If I do my bit and then I throw it over to you, maybe I write something, you edit it, fine. But if we're trying to come up with a framework together or a theory together, then we really need to have in place the conditions where we can actually collaborate real time. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I mean, the more complex the problem, the more likely it is we're going to have to do this kind of reciprocal coordination, where we're adjusting to one another, where we can see one another and kind of feel the energy from other people. And that, most, at least I don't know what you find with student teams, but I find, like, when I give these group projects to student teams, their first instinct is to try and design the work so they can throw everything over the wall to one another, and
to divide and conquer.
But if you don't know how to do the work, if it's going to require learning and creativity, you don't know enough to do that. And so you're going to have to go through a process where you're actually, having this more richer kinds of collaboration and coordination in order to get to the point where you could even think about how might we do this dividing and conquering. And that takes some trial and error experimentation that I find students of teamwork, whether they're executives or MBAs or undergraduates, often their first instinct is to try and get closer to that throw it over the wall model.
Right, right. Well, it's so logical in a way. I mean, I think the same way we have that individualism myth, I think we also have the teamwork myth that it's about dividing and conquering.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. Figure out who does what, and now we're going to be accountable to each other. We're going to do our bits, but spending less time on how are these bits going to not only fit together, but actually have synergy in their own right. Team building, right? That's a phrase we've all heard for decades. What do the traditional approaches to team building get wrong, and what should they do instead?
Yeah, team building, I mean, I'm sure you find the same thing when I'm like, I study teams. People want to tell me about all the team building activities that they've done and how much fun they were. And that a lot of team building activities are indeed fun. But I think there's a particular flaw in the thinking underlying a lot of them. And that thinking is that about the relationship between trust and teamwork. And that, there was this old theory by an educational psychologist named Bruce Tuckman, who taught me this important lesson about rhyming, where he came up with a model that
everybody knows.
Yeah, everybody knows.
Right?
Everybody
Even
knows.
If you've never heard his name, everybody knows.
Yeah, forming, storming, norming, performing, and later adjoining, so he got a little worse at rhyming as time went on there. But so this model is right on parts of its own terms. But if what you're doing is looking at work teams who have a particular project and they have a particular deadline, it turns out that it's not great at describing what they do. And that what it in particular, though, gets wrong is this idea that groups are always going to kind of get off to this slow start, that we're going to get together and we're going to kind of feel each other out, and until we sort of develop some trust and learn to know one another, then we can get to work. But what's wrong about that is the evidence is that there's a never-ending circle between trust and doing work with other people. And the main way that we learn to trust people, not in the I trust you with my deepest, darkest secrets kind of trust, but in the I know I can depend on you when I do this task and I give it to you, that you're going to be able to work on that to a certain standard. And I understand that we trust each other in that more work-based sense. And that we only learn that by working together, that I have to see you do it. And that, whether I like you, whether I believe you're worthy of hearing, my fears from childhood or not, that doesn't necessarily matter. That, some of my best friends and family members, I don't trust them with work tasks, right? I trust them in a different way. And that what we've learned from the science of team building is that the closer you get to the actual work we're going to do, the more that we can simulate it, the more it's like practice, the more valuable it is. And so the less valuable things are where we go offsite and we do something that's absolutely nothing like the work that we normally do. And we see this in all kinds of organizations that repeatedly do teamwork. Things like sports, they practice, they have training camp. In the military, they have boot camp. They go out and they do really high fidelity simulations. They invest in building these simulations to make them like the task. And that's how people learn to work together. And that I think that pattern of you do a little work, you have some small wins in the low stakes way, you reflect on what you learn and what we can do better. And that's where real team building comes from. But this idea that we're going to go off and do something, totally different, we're going to go camping and, do something that's nothing like our work. That's, it's not that's not fun or it's completely valueless. It's just not the quickest way to get effective teams.
I think sometimes those kinds of experiences can be the I don't know, the the break, like emotionally, they're emotionally meaningful, and we get to know each other in a new way. So there's sort of they break something down, but then they don't build up. What we then need is the follow through where we're actually practicing the real skills that the real work. We're doing the real work, and then we're somehow getting feedback either from ourselves or from an outsider on how we're doing, and are we getting better at it? Getting a little feedback on the sort of the teamwork itself, and that's a nice model, right? So if you're going to do, it's not that you don't do those things at all, but don't expect them to fix the team problem.
Yeah, exactly. That I think if what we need is, to kind of make sure that people from one part of an organization know people from another part of an organization.
Yeah.
If we, need to have some shared experiences that are fun and they're not like work, that's great. But then you have to be clear with yourself as an organization that that's what we're doing now, and not use it as a fix for, oh, we've got ineffective teams, therefore we're going to do things that people call team building,
right,
but in fact don't
help
more
our
effective
team. Yeah,
right, that's right.
Don't build us as a more effective team.
Yes.
Right? They may get our attention, but then they don't actually help us develop the skills that we need to do this hard thing well. This hard thing called teamwork. Here's a question I get asked a lot, and I don't have a good answer for it. So I'd love to hear your answer, which is, what is the ideal team size?
Oh, I absolutely have an answer for this, and I'm trying to get everyone to call this Hackman's number.
Okay.
So,
okay, we'll do it. I'll help.
Okay. So Richard Ackman has a pretty old study where what they did is ask everybody, how big's your team? And then say, well, do you think that team is too big or too small? Right. And then said, okay, let's plot that. And let's see where the too big line crosses the too small line. And the number it crosses at is 4.5 members. So
Wow.
the ideal team is 4.5 members.
Uh-oh.
And yeah, I know it's a little, we all might have to give up a limb or something on some of these teams, but I think that captures a fairly intuitive idea that if we think about, like, we're at a dinner party, how many people is the right number to have one conversation?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And that it's right in that range, right? Like a table of 4 or 5 people, I'm very confident that we can have a single conversation. Every person can be heard. Every person can contribute. But then once we get into this, 8, 9, 10 range, we could do it, right? But I'm not
it's a
so
seminar.
confident. Right.
But it's a seminar. Like, we only do it if we name it as a goal, and then someone basically facilitates. Otherwise, we're drifting off. Like, I'm next to you, and suddenly you and I are having a great conversation.
That's right.
Hey, you down there, not allowed.
Exactly. That we're probably going to break. Our instinct is to break into multiple conversations when we get that big. But that at work, we do it all the time. We have these meetings with 10, 15, 20, 30 people. And the chances in an hour that we're all going to contribute, that we're all going to share our perspectives or what we know, or have a meaningful, creative breakthrough or moment of learning, it's really low.
Right.
And so that's what this Hackman's number is trying to get us to do, is have the number of people where we can have those experiences.
Can we use that intuition, that science, in the following way, right? Like, let's say, I mean, if you're on a team to develop a brand new automobile, that team is going to have a couple of hundred people on it, right? So it's obviously beyond the dinner party. So is the logic then that we just make sure we're very clear about our sub teams?
Yeah, I mean, this gets into how we use the word team. And I think, this is something you've written about a lot as well, where we can either take the approach that our mentor took and say, no, real teams are these small interdependent groups with a collective purpose, and that when we say the word team, we should be referring to only these small groups, and that if you say you've got a team of 200, you're using the word team wrong. right.
You've got an organization,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that, even it's funny because even a basketball team, a professional basketball team
right.
might have 20 members, but there's only 5 on the court at once.
Right.
So is the 20 a team or they're.
So I think I would think of this kind of Hackman's number approach of ideal team size to mean the number of people who are actively collaborating and doing a task at a given moment. And that this, then we do have a choice about, well, do we just call these larger groups something else? And I don't think either you nor I think that that's right.
We don't have to solve that problem.
Yeah, no. But that I like to think of it as a continuum. And I would call it a continuum of groupiness, because the academic literature unhelpfully calls it group entitativity, which I think is not a very catchy term. So, there's, things we call groups like social categories, like, being American or being British or being a spelunker, that we have these big categories, but we don't interact at all. And then there's all the way to, a jazz ensemble or a basketball team who's on the court playing, and things are very clearly real teams. And so I think these Hackman's real teams are the groupiest groups, that they've got, this interaction, they've got a shared fate, they've got recognizable patterns, all these things. But that, it's not a bright line where there's some point where we're like, oh, it's not a team anymore. It's just the more that we have these things that make us think people are a team, which are common fate, shared pattern of interaction, observable commonalities that we then turn into identities, that the more of those we have, the groupier we are. And that at one poll, we call that a team more often than we don't. But that, I think people who are using the term team to mean my organizational unit of 200 people are probably not doing themselves any favors, but when they try and think about the sort of science of making teams better, where we usually do mean these smaller performing units.
Yeah, for sure. So shared fate, we have a shared goal, and we're going to be held, we're going to get credit or lack of credit for achieving that goal. Talk to us about goal setting. How important is it? How hard is it?
Yeah, goals, I think are one of the most common causes of failures in collaboration. That
in the wrong goals, or
just that we don't think we're doing the same thing. So that so many times I'm sure you've had the same experience. You'll get an organization say, oh yeah, we've got a very clear goal. We need to satisfy the client with the highest quality project by X date. Now that sounds reasonably clear, right? But then you watch a team who's trying to develop a new product, and they get to a point and it's like, well, we could make this better and push the deadline, or we could deliver the best thing we can given the time we have, but it won't be our best work. And that these understandings of what does it mean to do this goal? What are the hierarchy of the different kinds of success metrics that we could be looking at? And if they're in conflict with one another, how are we going to resolve that? Usually we don't have that conversation, and that people have just made their own assumptions about it. One person's assuming, hey, it's okay if we push the deadline, and I'm going to work as if, obviously it's going to be okay if we do that. And other people are working with no, we've got to deliver this by that time no matter what. And if that means we're going to cut some corners in the last week, then that's what it means. And that's where I see teams having goals that are not specific enough. And I think the kind of textbook definition of SMART goals, these specific, measurable, time, realistic, time-bound goals, those are great when you can do them. And that certainly you should push yourself to be as specific, as measurable, and to specify deadlines as much as you possibly can. but that there's a lot of times, especially when we're talking about these wicked problems, where we can't make it a smart goal, that we're too far away from that point. And if we're thinking something like, these UN grand challenges, like reducing poverty or something in the world,
wicked problem. Yeah.
And that, my friend and collaborator Andrew Carton has this great work that shows actually there's a tension between how big and important the goal is and being concrete and abstract and being really specific and measurable with it. And that the kind of more important the goal, the harder it is to be specific and measurable.
Right.
And so the
more
solution
motivated it is.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like we're motivated by these big important things, but then it makes this whole smart goal prescription to be more difficult. And so what he found was, what we need to do then is to paint a vision of the future that everyone who's collaborating can imagine, and that the more vivid that version of the future is, the more able to collaborate we're going to be, even in the absence of this one, a literal smart goal. So like, Bill Gates, when they were starting Microsoft, said, I want a computer on every desk in every home. Now, they weren't literally going to put a computer on every desk in every home, but it's painting this vivid picture of the future that we can all imagine together. And we're like, oh, now we can work together because we're all working towards the same aim. And so I think that's where why goals are so important.
That is, and it seems to me also in what you're saying, it's being clear about that distinction is important too. And even being clear about that dilemma or the tension between, the concrete and measurable and the more, diffuse and unreachable right now, but important and inspiring and motivating.
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes it's our first goal is to have a better goal, right? To better understand the problem. And that's the first discussion.
Ooh. I mean, that seems to me another failure mode for a group, right? Where it related to goal, where we just, as you said, we just get going assuming that we know what it is, that we know what the goal is, rather than making that an agenda item to really get clear, get agreement, and get as sort of measurable as we can on what it is that we're trying to do together.
Yeah. No, I mean, a lot of my research has been on creative teams and like design firms and groups in the arts. Like I have a study of experimental circus groups, and for them, like the idea of being able to have a smart goal right at the beginning is really, really foreign. Like if you're doing this kind of creative work, you almost can't do that. But that the amount of time we kind of spend collectively making sense of what is the problem we're even working on is really predictive of how well they're going to be able to collaborate. Because when we don't have these shared understandings of what this problem is, then that's when we really start to get into trouble.
It's this balance between taking the time to articulate what we know and what we're in our different mental models, what we're all thinking about, and not, and leaving openness to shifting the goals as we learn more. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a sort of a challenging act. Now, I have to, so you came to us to the doctoral program some years ago at Harvard as a very unusual candidate, probably the first professional musician we ever hired into the program.
I've strangely not, but
no, that's true.
No, Shasa Dobrow was there right before. There was a very accomplished bassoonist who was the first person I met in the field. I thought everybody was a musician when I showed up.
At that point, yeah. Although I think she, who's wonderful, was less sort of. It's almost like when you came, it's like you wanted to understand a lived reality that you were having, right? So you sort of took your prior experience and brought it to it shaped your question, it shaped you in a way, I guess. Anyway, but so given that, I can't resist asking a music question, and I have no expertise at all, even though, much of the things we're talking about, we both understand and share a same mentor.
Yeah.
But why are some bands, say the Rolling Stones, able to thrive, able to be popular and good for decades, while others like have a single hit and that's the last we hear of them?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great question, and
it's a team question.
Yeah, it's a team question, and this gets really to the heart of like, what do we mean an effective team? Because we've seen so many, like a band that has a single hit that they're a one-hit wonder, that they succeed, but it tears them apart, and that they can't even collaborate, they can't be in the same room together after they have this one-hit song. And that what I think the Rolling Stones have done really well is they've stayed together by understanding that no one group can be everything for you. That when members wanted to go off and do some other things, they went off and did some other things. That even though they've had remarkable stability for being together for 60 years ish, that they that they still, some members have come and gone. I mean, some of them have passed away now, but they keep going by, keeping their boundaries clear, but still they're porous and they're connected to other activities. And then I think the kind of quote of one member of the Rolling Stones was saying, we stay in it because it's still fun, and that when it's not fun, we're not going to do it. And that not just chasing this sort of, if we don't have a number one hit, then we're not successful, and that having this kind of narrower view of what it means to be an effective band, but to also acknowledge, of course we want to succeed and we want to have hits, but we also need to have our own needs as individuals satisfied, and we also need to still like being around each other, and that we don't consider it successful unless we still like being in the room together. And they've gone through ups and downs. It's not that they've never fought or they've never
you have to fight, right?
I
mean, don't
gone through rocky periods.
Fight, or at least have conflict to be
you're certainly, your research would tell us, like, if we're not disagreeing and we're not voicing times when we have different ideas about what we should do, then we're probably not doing it right. That a team that never disagrees and never ever fights, that's probably a mark of a lack of psychological safety more than it's a mark of a healthy team. Absolutely. I think these great bands in a way are showing us stuff that it's hard to see in other settings, because in music, actually, we do see groups that stay together longer than almost any other domain that we can think of, where when you have a really successful, string quartet or band like the Rolling Stones, we get to contrast them from, some of these bands that had hits right at the same time as the Rolling Stones' first hit, and still see that's not what kept them in business over the years.
Maybe a family, right? A family can be a similar, a healthy, like, because when you were describing, a healthy band, it's like there's going to be disagreement. There's a collective identity, but there's also individual identity and needs and occasional, forays into other ventures. And that strikes me as a good metaphor for many many work teams need to have those attributes. And I think healthy families can have that too. It's like you're always going to be part of this family, but you have to have your own identity and work and activities to be a healthy individual from a healthy family in a healthy family.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a mistake if you're part of a group that's saying, like, this is the only group you need and this is the only group you're ever going to be a part of. That's not going to be a healthy group very long. And that we, with the groups that are like that, we usually call cults, that want you to just be only in this group and to not have any connections to anything else. But yet, a lot of organizations kind of take this mentality when they're thinking about the kind of culture they want to have, the kind of work norms they want to have. And it's like, well, we want to get as much of your attention as we possibly can. And that's, not a recipe for long-term success.
No, absolutely. So we've been talking about teams really all this time. And one of the questions, and it's on my mind as well, I think a question that came in the Q&A is, what about the role of leaders? What about the leadership role? And how important is that in explaining a healthy team? And then if you sort of say it's important, is that maybe violating the whole idea of team?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question, and that's at the center of a lot of the discussions that we usually have. And that I think it's important to think separately about two things. One is leader as the occupant of particular roles in an organization that have some kind of power, right? And so if we think about, are those leaders important? Yeah, they often are the ones who have an easier time pulling some of these levers about what are the goals, what are the tasks, what's the composition of this team going to be, who's going to be on it, and what resources can we provide. So those people will have an easier time doing a lot of things than other people. But there's also leadership, which is not necessarily provided by the occupant of these formal leader roles. And that in the best teams, what we see is that leadership, which means anyone who's contributing to improving the group's goals, to clarifying them, to creating psychological safety, any of these things, that can be a leadership behavior that anyone on the team can do. And so that kind of leadership should be shared, and that the more people we have participating in trying to provide the group with the resources it needs, with the direction it needs, the better. And so both leaders and leadership are important.
Yes.
And sometimes they're not important for exactly the same reasons. And I think, sometimes it gets confusing where we try and say, well, only the formal leader should provide leadership. And that's where I think we make an individualistic mistake. That the
That's
team,
an error. That's another one of those myths, right? That's like part of the individualism myth.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Yeah, we should give it a rhyming name of some kind.
Yes, let's. We can take credit for it. Honestly, I was just smiling. I don't know if you noticed, but just really smiling as you were answering that, because you're answering it. I get asked that question, and you're answering it exactly the way I do, probably slightly more coherent, but it is this. It is so. I wish everybody could really internalize the difference between leader as a role and leadership as a behavior that you are engaging in anytime you're doing things, small and large, to make the team work better, or to make the organization work better. When you're being a positive influence on others and on processes, you are exercising leadership. And frankly, I'm more interested in leadership than leaders per se.
Absolutely.
Temperamentally, maybe it's because of this team, the team thing. So it's just super important. So, okay, there's one more question that, of course, it's almost you should be asking me, but I'm going to turn it around and ask it on you, which is someone asked, how do you get people to tell each other the truth about what did and didn't work in the team or the collaboration, kind of breaking through the culture of nice?
Yeah, I know. You definitely should be the one answering this question. All right. Yeah, I mean, I basically am going to recite what's part of what's in your articles, but yeah. I mean, if people aren't doing that, it is a sign that you don't have psychological safety in this group. And that's the safety to take interpersonal risks. And interpersonal risks are things like speaking up, asking questions, challenging the status quo in the group, admitting your mistakes. And that this is a part where I think formal leaders can end up having an outsized influence on the psychological safety of the group, often, unfortunately, in a negative direction, where if you have a group like that, the chances that at least part of it is that you have a leader who has made people feel small for making a suggestion or asking a question, is criticizing or otherwise just signaling they don't have time for people to really disagree in a meaningful way. And so this kind of
I
like
look at my watch, right?
You bad is stronger than good.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. The bad is stronger than good idea means, so first, if you have a leader who's doing that, you have to get them to stop doing that. and that you have, then what needs to replace that is somebody who is actively encouraging it and saying, no, what we want is for us to tell us the truth. And I think that, if somebody is saying that, that's already a great start. And then praising people when they do those things, those are all things that you can do. But if you're not the formal leader and you can't help, I think the superpower of leadership behaviors for team members who don't have power is asking questions.
Yes.
And just say, like, hey, why do we do things this way? Is there a better way?
Colin, I'd love your thoughts on this.
Why are we having this meeting? What's the goal? Like all these things.
What kind of meeting is this? Is this a decide meeting, an informed meeting, a brainstorm meeting?
Great question. And that saying great question and all these things.
I feel good. Great. Thank you.
And these are all the kinds of things we can do. But if you do have somebody who's acting against this psychological safety and is in power, it's hard.
They need and deserve your feedback. Right? That becomes the sort of the bottom line. Wow, time flew. Listen, it's such a good book. And it's, you talk about it so well, and I'm thrilled that it's out there. Encourage everyone to read.
Thank you so much, Amy. It was so great to chat with you and see you again. It's been a while.
Amy, thank you so much for really just a great lively interview with Colin. He was well served by having you here. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your contribution to the program and to FAN. Thank you. I want to remind folks, Colin's going to give us another technically 27 minutes of his time from 1:03 to 1:30 p.m. Central. You can come to after hours, make a donation, any dollar amount to FAN. We've been putting the link in chat over and over again. Any dollar amount, come hang out, ask questions about, there were some questions submitted during the event about, looks like from educators wanting to know about in school context, team context. I was talking to my son about this program. He said, oh, great. Nothing like a group project. Love the group project. So I'm sure many teachers have that problem with group projects. I want to offer one question that we maybe didn't quite get to, but in my meetings, we have 70 some odd schools, partners, and organizations as FAN summer meetings. And one thing that kept coming up over and over again, I'm curious where the dovetail is, Colin, with your work, which is the role of AI, and as it is just exploding faster than perhaps everybody except the AI insiders might have predicted. Where do you see the influence, pros, cons of the effect of AI on group dynamics in particular? I'd be curious what you have to say about that.
I mean, I think it's going to depend a lot on what kind of work you're doing and how people are using AI. And that I suspect the best way for AI to end up being a positive force, and I think ultimately for the most part, it's going to make most groups' lives easier and get them not doing work they don't want to be doing and to outsource it. But that the way forward for that is to try stuff, to reflect on how it went, but then for teams that are doing this well, to share with the rest of the organization what they're doing. And I think that what's going wrong with AI right now is that there's a lot of stigma associated with admitting how you're using it. And so because of that, we're not really learning very much about what people are really doing, because we have not created a culture where it's safe to admit exactly what we are and we aren't doing with it. And so even within teams, often people don't admit to each other, here's what we are and here's what we're not doing. And as long as we have that, I think progress is going to be slow. That, if you're writing your emails to me with AI, fine, but tell me, and then we can talk about when that's a good idea and maybe when that's not such a good idea. And but that if we're not telling each other and we're just sending emails back and forth that were both written by AI, that's when we're going to have a problem, right? Like that's when we're not moving forward anymore. So I think sunlight is the best medicine for this, and that's at the team level. So talking really honestly within your team, hopefully you have the psychological safety to do that, about what we are and what we're not doing with it. And for teams that are really working effectively with AI or have found something that doesn't work, that they're sharing that with the rest of the organization or the rest or with other teams. But I do think, we're going to have a lot of people who find better ways to do this, and that there are going to be real gains from AI, but that we're only going to really see those gains scale when we're being honest with each other about what we are and are not doing with it.
All right. Well, thank you for that. We're at 101, so we're going to close down now. I know, 101.
Yeah.
Everybody, thanks for joining us. We're going to be opening up that Zoom. We're going to give Colin 3 minutes to get his stuff together, and then we'll be opening up that room. Come hang out with us again. Amy, hope to welcome you again back soon. And everyone, hope to see you learn all about Robin Hood math next Monday. I know. I love it.
Sounds
Thanks,
great.
everybody. Have a good night or good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
On autopilot. Good night. Good day, everyone.
Thank you,
Take
Amy.
care.